This is my Gen 2 tilting belt grinder along with the Gen 2 small wheel attachment. I've been selling plans for this whole kit for a few years now, but this small wheel attachment has proved a little bit problematic. Well, rather, the attachment itself hasn't been problematic, but these aluminum holder sides have been. These are made by a specific manufacturer, and I designed the entire attachment around them. That was a mistake, because they frequently go out of stock and they don't ship to all countries. So that makes the entire design kind of not viable for anyone who can't get these holder sides. So I've designed an entirely new one. And here it is, Gen 2.1. I'm calling it Gen 2.1 because I figure calling it Gen 3 would be confusing since there is no Gen 3 belt grinder. It's part of the Gen 2 series, just kind of a bug fix. You'll notice there are no aluminum holder sides at all. I've just eliminated the proprietary parts altogether. The only thing that's special at all is the small wheel itself, but there are several manufacturers that make compatible small wheels, so that shouldn't be a problem. Pretty much the only reason that I redid this design was to get rid of those aluminum holder sides, but since I was working on it anyways, I figured I might as well make a few other upgrades, so let me give you a little tour of the new design. Gen 2.1 is a little bit more compact than Gen 2. So here we're looking at a top view of Gen 2.0 and here's 2.1. You can see how it's a bit narrower overall, especially toward the front. And here's a side view. It's a much more dramatic difference. You can see how Gen 2.1 is much more consolidated. Gen 2.1 is also capable of grinding the inside of a narrower slot than Gen 2 could. With Gen 2.1, you can easily grind the inside of a 1/2 inch wide slot, whereas Gen 2 could only go down to about 3/4. Even with the same tiny small wheel, you can see that the belt is not wrapping around a full 180 degrees. So it quickly gets wider as you go farther back. And this is partly because the plate that's in between here has to be thicker to accommodate the tapped holes for the bolts that hold these sides on. And it's also partly just that I didn't optimize the design as well as I could have. So you can see that the belt is not as close to the plate here as it could be. So I could have a tighter bend around that end if I had just put this wheel in line with this plate. And the same thing over here on this side. The belt is not all the way against the plate here, so I could have optimized this better if I put this wheel a little bit closer in. And now looking at Gen 2.1 again, this 3/8 inch plate that is between the two sides is exactly in line with the small wheel. So if you look at it from here, you can see how it's lined up. And then it's also lined up with the deflector wheel back here. And then on this side, this rubber deflector wheel is mounted as close as possible to this plate. The hole in this side plate is oversized so that you can adjust this to be just the right amount of gap for the belt to fit through. So all of that just ensures that the belt coming around this will do a full 180 so that it stays the same width all the way back. When I unveiled the XY table earlier this year, I showed it grinding a cove by sliding a workpiece past the small wheel attachment. This is another thing that the new small wheel attachment is much better for. Here I'm trying to use a 7/8 inch wheel to grind a cove into this piece, but you can see how the holder sides are way too bulky. I just run into them. But with Gen 2.1, the holder sides don't stick out past the wheel, so I can use a wheel at least as small as the bearings before anything else gets in the way. The other place where these bulky aluminum sides got in the way was using the adjustable angle table. So you can see here, it's not as close to this small wheel as I would like it to be. But with that same small wheel installed in Gen 2.1, I can bring the table right up to it. Possibly my favorite feature is how the small wheels snap into place. I used to always forget to take the small wheel out of the attachment when I was pulling it out of the grinder, and since there's nothing to retain it, the wheel would fall on the floor. I never damaged any of these wheels because I have rubber on the floor, but it's certainly better if they just don't fall out. So one thing you might have noticed is that on Gen 2, these bolted-on holder sides can actually be adjusted. If the wheel is not quite square, you can loosen these bolts and shift the holder sides front to back to adjust the squareness. This posed a little bit of a challenge with Gen 2.1 because I wanted these holder sides to just be part of the structure, but it's still absolutely critical that the wheel be square this way. I think I heard someone say once that if you can't make it adjustable, at least make it perfect or something like that. Honestly, that's probably the part of this new design that I'm the most excited about, the most proud of. The technique that I came up with for aligning these sides during the build so that it comes out perfectly square every time. And that's a good segue into the build. So here I'm getting started on the build, attaching paper templates for the two side pieces. And I'll rough cut those with a bandsaw. The The plans also come with DXF files in case you want to CNC cut these or send them out to be CNC cut. Only this one hole gets drilled now. All of the other holes are common between the two pieces, so we're going to attach them together to drill them. I should have ground this outer profile before I removed the template, but oh well, I'll just have to eyeball it later. So I've just aligned the two pieces by eye, and then I'm clamping them together, and then checking the plans for where I'm going to put 2 tack welds. These 2 tack welds will hold these pieces together well enough to do all of the drilling and shaping as if they're a single part. There are 3 critical edges on here, and we're going to grind those with the belt grinder. I'm also making sure that they're not convex, so I don't want this piece to be able to rock on the table. So you see me standing it up and pressing it down on the table to make sure that it's not rocking. And there are our 3 edges that are going to be used as references. All of the other edges can now be ground, just making sure to not grind away the 2 tack welds. And none of these are reference surfaces, so they don't need to be terribly precise. And now we can go ahead and drill all of the holes through both of these pieces. By doing both the grinding and the drilling with these parts tack welded together, we make sure that the holes and the outside reference surfaces are in the right spot relative to each other. This is a step drill bit, and notice that the largest step is 7/8 of an inch. I'm basically just going to use this step drill as a reamer to bring the hole out to 7/8 of an inch. And this produces a really nice, precise, round 7/8 hole that fits the bearing perfectly, as you can see here. And now I'm marking where to cut that off. And the plans include a 1-to-1 template if you want to use a template instead of just measuring this. And now I'm just using the belt grinder to open up those front corners a little bit and rounding over the front edges. I'm checking with the bearings as I go, opening it up just a little at a time until I get a nice snap fit. Now we're done with all of the operations that need to be done to both parts at the same time, so I'm grinding off the tack welds and separating the parts. I'll clean up this inside curve a little bit. Just doing this by eye, it doesn't need to be precise. This hole in the right side plate gets enlarged to a 1/2 inch, and then the same hole in the left side plate gets tapped. The small hole at the front of each side plate gets tapped 1/4 I generally use a block of wood with a hole in it to start the tap to make sure I get it started straight. That's it for the side plates, so I'm doing a bit more work on the rest of the pieces. This is the tool arm, and I'm just using the grinder to grind a nice chamfer into the side of it. This will be where the clamping knob presses against. This is the cross member that goes between the 2 side plates. I'm running it between a fence and the belt grinder to bring it down to exactly 2.5 inches. So here's how the pieces go together. I'm just marking where all of the pieces meet, and then I'm going to chamfer all of them so that I have a V to fill in with weld. We'll start the assembly by setting up the tool arm on a flat surface, making sure that the chamfer is facing the right direction, and then clamp on these 2 spacer blocks and tack them in place. For each of these parts, you want to make sure that there aren't any burrs or weld spatter or anything like that that could prevent them from sitting flat against the table or flat against each other. And right here is the most critical part of this setup. It's important to do this on a flat surface, so I'm using my table saw for this. It's sort of the flattest thing in the shop. And again, make sure that these parts don't have any weld spatter on them or any burrs. I'm pushing a square up against the back of these pieces. Since these back edges were ground at the same time while these parts were welded together, and the front holes were drilled at the same time, that means that as long as it's touching the square here and here, the front holes will be perfectly across from each other. Again, this being a really critical step, it's important for it to be perfect, so here I'm just checking with a piece of paper to make sure that it doesn't go under anywhere. That ensures that it's all sitting flat on the table. And then here I'm also trying to grip the paper between the square and the back edge of the side plates. If the paper was loose on one side, then that would indicate that one of the side plates was shifted forward and not all the way back against the square. Satisfied that it's accurate enough, I'm tack welding it together. I'm just tack welding it for now because we can always cut these tack welds later if somehow it wasn't actually perfect, and we'll check it before welding it solid. Here's that piece that we ground down to 2.5 inches before. It should fit perfectly between these sides. I'm clamping on a flat piece across the bottom of them and then putting this 3/8 inch thick spacer in between, and then slipping that cross member in on top. So this positions it in the right spot. I'm just tack welding on the corners of the crossmember plate. You don't want any weld on the top or bottom of this plate because that could interfere with the belt. And yeah, because of how we set that up with the 3/8 inch spacer, we now have a nice 3/8 inch offset from the plate to the bottom edge. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily assemble this with the wheels. So there's an aluminum wheel. This is normally used for a platen attachment. And then a rubber wheel. This is the one that runs against the grit side of the belt. And then these two bolts just keep the small wheel from slipping out the sides of the notches, and then the small wheel itself. And now we can put on a belt. Just run it by hand to check the tracking for now. Don't try to grind anything with it, and I don't even recommend turning it on. I am technically turning it on here, but only running it really slowly. This is just to check the tracking. Run it in forward and reverse, make sure that it tracks correctly, and then also check the squareness of the wheel right here. If this isn't right, you might need to cut it back apart and try again, but I've never seen it not be right. So yeah, seeing that it tracks well enough and the wheel is square, I can go ahead and weld the rest of it solid. And now prepping it for paint, I'm just putting a bit of tape on the inside of the wheel notches because they're really precise. The paint would be enough to prevent the wheel from going in. And I also taped off the tool arm where it goes into the receiver tube on the grinder. I'm reassembling it the same as before. When I put in this wheel, I can adjust it up and down to make sure that it's the right distance away from that plate so that the belt just fits between. And with that, it's done, and we can put a belt on it. Plans are now available, so if you want to build one of these yourself, you can get these. It's a 15-page document. It includes shopping list, cutting list, printable templates, and then step-by-step instructions for how to build it. I sell the plans for this as part of a bundle along with the contact wheel attachment and the adjustable angle table. And of course, I also sell plans for the entire belt grinder if you haven't built that yet. If you've already bought this bundle, but you got it with the Gen 2 small wheel attachment, you can just send me an email and include the plans for your Gen 2 attachment or include your Etsy order number, and I will send you the new ones. You don't have to buy it again. You can find my email address on the second page of your existing plans. And of course, there's links for all of this in the description. So that's it. Thanks for watching.